Hey everyone, I've got a best bits tutorial for you today. In this video taken from my vinyl strap tutorial, I am sharing with you all my best tips for when you sew up a vinyl strap. With that strap piece cut, I'm now going to draw a line down the center of the entire length. The center of a 4-inch strap is going to be 2 inches. On a 3-inch strap, the center is going to be 1.5 inches, and so on. When I'm working with a stretchier material like certain vinyls or something that is a little thinner, I like to add some reinforcement using a strip of grosgrain ribbon. You can use stabilizer instead. Something like Decaville Light works really well too. I like to put the ribbon, which is 3/4 inch wide, in just one section of my strap, keeping it out of the seam allowance so that it provides that extra stability for the strap, which is particularly important over time with the weight that is on the strap that doesn't stretch, and some vinyls will even crack if they have too much weight on them over time. So this reinforcement will help with that. So the way that I do that is just pop a little bit of double-sided tape in one section and then stick that ribbon down onto the back of that vinyl. Now take your 1/8 inch double-sided tape and we're going to put a strip on either side of this center line. We're now going to do the first stage of our double fold. We are going to be folding the long raw edge into the center, stopping just shy of that line that we made earlier, coming from the top and the bottom. I like to start in the middle of the strap and work my way to one end and then to the other end, taking care when I'm folding to fold straight over to the middle and not skew the vinyl at all, as that can lead to twisting in our finished strap. If you're having trouble with your vinyl coming unstuck as you go, you can use a seam roller to press that fold or pop some clips on to hold that fold in place while we keep working. And we'll flip it around and repeat from the center on the other side, again making sure that as we fold, we are folding straight across and not twisting that strap at all, and leaving a gap of about 1/16 inch in between the two raw long edges of our strap. Now that we have the first 2 folds done, we're going to fold the strap over onto itself again to fully enclose this raw long edge of our vinyl strap, lining up these 2 folded edges as well as you can. Before I take this over to the sewing machine to sew the strap itself, there are a couple of things I like to check. The first is check how well the edges are lining up. If your edges are not lined up pretty close to perfectly flat, then it is likely that you have some skewing in your folds. And if you don't correct for them now, then when you go to sew your strap, it will end up having twists in it and it won't sit nice and flat. So that is the first thing that I check. The second thing is check the finish width after it is folded, and it should be pretty close to 1 inch if you did a 4-inch wide piece, which should match your hardware. So you can just check if that's going to work with the hardware that you have, and that one looks good. And also check to see if your strap, even though it has clips on it and it's not going to sit perfectly flat, just make sure that doesn't have any obvious twists in it, so that when you sew it, you're likely to get the best result possible. That all looks fine, so I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to get our strap sewn up. There are a few things that I always like to check before I start sewing a vinyl strap. The first is make sure that my tension is correct. When you are sewing a vinyl strap, because you're going through so many layers of vinyl, your tension often needs to be increased. If you sew through 4 layers of vinyl with just your regular tension on your machine, the stitches may look fine from the front, but when you flip over to the back, they're not going to be as even as you might like. The tension of the top thread will pull up that bobbin thread so that you get a nice even stitch. So if you increase your tension, you're going to get a better looking stitch on your finished strap. So I recommend testing that out with some scraps of vinyl of equal thickness to your strap to make sure that you've got your settings correct. So that's the first thing. The second thing is make sure that your bobbin has enough thread in it, because you don't want to run out of thread in the middle of sewing your strap. I prefer to use a walking foot when I'm sewing my strap. You can, if you don't have a walking foot, use a Teflon foot or a rolling foot, but I find that the walking foot is going to give me the most even feed of my strap through the machine, so I'm not going to get twisting of my finished strap. If you are using one of these other options, then I suggest sewing down one long side, finishing off your stitches, and then sewing the same direction from the back so that you don't get as much twisting in your finished strap as you would if you sewed around the whole strap in one go. When you are sewing your strap, you want to use a longer stitch length. I like to use a stitch length of 4 on my straps. That may vary on your machine, and I use a seam allowance of 1/8 of an inch. The way that I like to determine where I am sewing is to look at my presser foot and pick a point on that presser foot that is approximately 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that I can get a nice consistent stitch line. On this particular presser foot, that is going to be this edge here. I also have my hump jumper handy in case I have parts of the strap that are hard to get around, because as you can see, part of my foot is not on the strap, so that may make it hard at some points. I'm going to be putting strap ends on my strap so I can backstitch at the start here. The other thing to be aware of too is with the walking foot, the edge of your vinyl strap can get caught on this little piece here. So you just want to be sure when you're starting that you're getting your strap properly out of the way. Raise your presser foot and just make sure that that's flattened out. And that's the other good thing about starting at the end of your strap. If you have a couple of shorter stitches because it hasn't fed through properly, that will be hidden underneath your strap end. Make sure your presser foot is down when you start. And I like to pivot right at the corner. Ensure that your needle has gone all the way down before you turn. Watching again as you get here that it is not catching on the foot right here as it goes underneath. I've just flipped that around to start again from the other side, as I like to start with the open side of the strap first so that I can ensure that my layers are nice and lined up, and then that will make sewing the second side much easier because I'm not worrying about where my folds are meeting up. I'm watching here. I'm just going to raise the presser foot so I can get over that bulky bit, and then I will continue down this long open edge all the way to the other short edge of the strap. Before I get too far in my strap, I like to check how my tension looks so that if I need to make any adjustments, I can do it before I get too far into my sewing. I'm making sure that the strap is feeding through nice and flat and evenly. If I were sewing with a Teflon foot or a rolling foot, I would finish my stitch line here at the end of the strap and take it off the machine and turn it back around and sew from this end again so that I'm not going to get as much twisting in my strap. But because I'm using the walking foot, I'm going to continue around and sew down the folded edge. Sometimes hand cranking at the corner there can help it to not miss that corner stitch. And make sure again that the bulk of the strap is not getting caught on your walking foot. And then we will sew again down the closed side of the strap. A couple of other things to consider when you are sewing straps to help you get a nice even line of stitches is where your eyes are looking. When I am looking at my strap going through the machine, I'm not watching my needle. I am watching the edge here that I have chosen for my specific seam allowance so that I know that I'm getting a nice straight line of stitches. So I'm actually looking a little further ahead than where the needle is. And the other thing to consider is using a consistent speed as you're sewing, and stopping and starting as few times as possible will also help you to get a nice even stitch when you're sewing your strap. Back stitching again at the end. Reposition your needle manually if you need to get it lined up with those end stitches there. I will have a link to the full tutorial in the video description. Hope that helps. Thanks everyone.